Stephen Colbert looked into the camera, eyebrows raised, smile wide. My next guest tonight is a rising conservative voice who has a lot to say, and even more people saying it for her. Please welcome Karoline Leavitt. Polite applause. Not wild, because the room was curious. Curious to see if she'd play along or push back. Karoline walked out confidently. No swagger, no pretense, just clear-eyed presence. She wore a muted blazer. No frills, no gimmicks. And when she sat down, she didn't scan the audience or fake a grin. She simply looked at Stephen and waited. Stephen smiled. Karoline, thank you for joining me. I know it's probably a little weird to be here. What with me being, well, me. Laughter. Karoline gave a half smile. I don't do weird, Stephen. Just different. Stephen chuckled. Touché. So let's dive in. You've been pretty vocal about mainstream media being biased. I assume that includes me? Karoline nodded once. If the shoe fits. And I'd argue yours is custom-made. The audience laughed, some nervously, some genuinely. Stephen raised his eyebrows. Okay, coming in hot. Karoline didn't blink. No, just not here to be styled for applause. That line made the laughter stop. Not because it was awkward, because it was true. Stephen leaned forward. You're not afraid to spar, are you? I didn't come to spar, she said. I came to speak. Stephen Colbert glanced at his card, then back at Karoline. He smiled like a man who thought he still owned the moment. You know, I've been watching your interviews. You've got that polished Fox News energy. The media's biased. The government's overreaching. The country's being taken from you. Chuckles from the audience. He continued. But I've got to ask, who exactly took it? More laughs. Karoline didn't react. She waited, then said, It's not about who took it. It's about who stopped caring what they were taking. The room quieted. It wasn't applause-worthy. It was interruptive. The kind of sentence that makes people stop smiling without knowing why. Stephen tried again. You've got a lot of strong opinions. I mean, you're 20-something and already convinced you've got all the answers. Karoline raised an eyebrow. You're 50-something and still mistaking disagreement for arrogance. There it was. The first real crack in the show's shell. Not a zinger. Not a punch. Just an unshakable line, calmly delivered, that let everyone know. She wasn't here to entertain. She was here to stand. Stephen nodded slowly. All right, so let's talk values. You've said you want to restore traditional American ideals. What does that even mean? We go back to the 1950s. Smirks. More laughs. Karoline stayed poised. It means speaking without shame, working without apology, and remembering that a free country doesn't last long with a fake press. The air tightened. It wasn't offensive. It was precise. And suddenly the audience didn't know whether to laugh or lean in. They leaned in. Stephen shifted. So you're saying I'm fake? Karoline looked at him square. I'm saying this room doesn't expect honesty from people like me. And I'm not here to meet expectations. He didn't respond right away. Because for the first time, the applause sign might not have helped. The audience wasn't watching a guest anymore. They were watching a reckoning. Stephen Colbert shifted in his chair. He smiled again, but it didn't reach his eyes. The cards in his hands suddenly felt thin. So he tossed them on the desk. All right, Karoline, let's stop dancing around this. She didn't move. She wasn't dancing. You're part of a movement that's been pushing fear over facts, Stephen said. Isn't that dangerous? Some claps. A cheer or two. But the response wasn't strong. Not because they didn't agree. Because they were watching something deeper. A woman who refused to be baited. Karoline folded her hands. Stephen, you've made a living off snark. I don't blame you for it. But the country I care about doesn't laugh when people lose their jobs, or their rights, or their voice. So no, I'm not afraid of being labeled dangerous by someone whose studio audience claps on command. That stopped the laughter cold. No anger in her voice. No sharpness. Just the kind of precision that makes a room remember how much they've let slide for the sake of a punchline. Stephen chuckled softly, but his voice cracked. I'm just trying to ask questions. Karoline nodded. Then ask better ones. Silence. The kind that isn't awkward. It's overdue. Stephen looked toward the side of the stage. Someone was waving. He ignored it. Because deep down he knew. This wasn't a segment anymore. This was a moment. And it wasn't his. Karoline leaned back slightly. If you want to mock me, that's fine. But just be honest with your audience about what this is. You didn't invite me here to understand me. You invited me to interrupt me. So your applause would feel earned. No one clapped. Because the room knew it was true. Stephen Colbert sat back in his chair, hands flat on the desk. He still had lines left. Rebuttals. Sarcasm. That familiar smirk. But the air had changed. It wasn't a comedy show anymore. It was a live broadcast of a guest choosing not to be molded. Karoline Leavitt didn't raise her voice. She didn't lean forward. She simply adjusted her sleeves and said, "Stephen, this isn't a conversation anymore. It's a test. And I don't need to pass it." The crowd didn't move. No clapping. No shifting. Just eyes, locked on her, not him. Stephen forced a smile. "So that's it. You're just going to walk off." Karoline paused. "I came here to speak. You came here to win. But I don't debate for applause. I speak for the people who never get invited to this room in the first place." She stood. Slowly. No anger. Just certainty. The kind that didn't need a camera to justify it. The room held its breath. Because the silence wasn't uncomfortable. It was earned. Stephen opened his mouth to say something. But Karoline was already facing the audience. "You all came for entertainment. But maybe what we need more than laughs right now is honesty." Then she walked off. No one moved. Not even the band. Because it didn't feel like she left the segment. It felt like she outgrew it, in real time. Stephen looked at the crowd. Then at his desk. He was still in the chair. But the moment wasn't his anymore. And everyone knew it. The camera cut to black. No applause. No outro music. Just silence. The kind you feel in your teeth. Stephen Colbert sat there a second longer than necessary. Then looked down at his desk. He didn't say anything. And that said everything. The segment went live at 11:47 p.m. By 1 a.m., the clip had already spread across 3 platforms. Unedited. Unexplained. Just raw footage. Karoline seated. Stephen poking. Karoline standing. And then gone. Comments poured in fast. That wasn't a walk-off. That was a walkthrough. She didn't storm out. She dismissed the show. This wasn't her meltdown. It was his. She just exposed late night for what it's become, smug, soft, and scared of real answers. The hashtags trended by morning. Hashtag Colbert got cooked. Hashtag she didn't come to flinch. Hashtag respect Karoline. People weren't yelling. They were remembering. The moment wasn't flashy, but it left a mark. Because Karoline didn't react emotionally. She made everyone else question why they were laughing in the first place. Stephen stayed silent. No opening monologue the next night. No reference to the interview. No tweet. He moved on. But the audience didn't. Every comment section under the next few episodes was flooded. "Why haven't you addressed Karoline Leavitt? You can't joke your way out of that one. When are you going to apologize?" And that was the problem. Because the moment had passed. But the silence hadn't. Karoline Leavitt never responded. She didn't repost the clip. She didn't thank her supporters. She didn't issue a statement or give a follow-up interview. Because she didn't need to. The moment was already complete. And that's why people couldn't stop watching it. Stephen Colbert kept going. New episodes. New jokes. New guests who laughed at the right time. But something had changed. Because now, every guest who sat in that chair after her sat a little straighter. And the audience noticed. A few voices in media tried to frame it as a misunderstanding. She wasn't ready for comedy. She took things too seriously. It was just an off night. But no one believed it. Because the footage was too clean. Too quiet. Too true. Commenters refused to let it go. This wasn't about politics. It was about posture. She didn't walk off because she lost. She walked off because she wasn't going to lose herself. You invited her to be a punchline. She came in as a headline. Why hasn't Colbert apologized? That question became the center of it all. Not because people expected him to say sorry, but because the silence confirmed something worse. He didn't see what happened. And that's what made the story viral. Karoline didn't go viral because she shouted. She went viral because she didn't stay where she wasn't being heard. She didn't demand an apology. She gave people permission to stop waiting for one. So the story didn't end with a confrontation. It ended with a question no one could shake. Why do we still laugh when the person being mocked refuses to play along? And in that question, the audience made up their mind. Stephen didn't lose a guest. He lost the room.